Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Abrax and today we're gonna be continuing looking at the Elementalist. This time in this video we're gonna check all the trait lines and I'm gonna give you a commentary about each trait, what they bring to the table, how to use them, and we will continue with our comprehensive look at the Elementalist. So let's open the hero panel and check the trait lines, and we're gonna start by Arcane. Arcane is pretty interesting because it's basically the trait line that enhances the core ability of the Elementalist, which is the attunement swap, right? So the very first trait, Arcane Prowess, gain might when you switch attunements. Pretty basic. Every time you switch attunements you're gonna get might, which is useful because obviously as an Elementalist we are constantly changing attunements, and might is gonna allow us to basically do more damage. Now some players will remember that this trait used to give Fury, which was a really good trait for the Arcane line, because Arcane is basically a utility line and you could go like with very defensive options on other trait lines and still get Fury for more damage. It was really useful, for example, in PvP builds. Now they changed it to Might, which I think it's arguably a better option for more builds, both PvE, PvP. They put a new trait on the Air trait line, which gives Fury on creep. I think what ArenaNet was trying to do was streamline the air line to be the critical hit line, which is okay. I kinda miss the Fury that this trait used to give, but Might is also a really good choice. Okay, so now we're gonna look at the very first trait group. Arcane Precision, your critical hits have a chance to inflict conditions based on your attunement. Basically, you inflict burning on fire, vulnerability on water, weakness on air, bleeding on earth. Pretty basic. I mean, this might help condition builds that run Arcane. Not so much power builds, I think. Maybe some PvP builds can use the weakness. If, I don't know, Fresh Air might use the weakness a bit, although these traits are way better. But anyway, we have Arcane Precision. Then we have Renew and Stamina, gain Vigor when you critically strike a foe. This is a very useful trait. In PvP it's going to help you dodge more. If you combine it with Evasive Arcana, which we're going to look into in a second, the Vigor is really important for that. Has a 10-second cooldown, pretty good trait. Then we have Arcane Abatement, which is the fall damage trait that will create a Ring of Fire, a Cleansing Wave, a Static Shield, or an Earthquake. But most importantly, you will heal yourself swapping attunements. So this swapping attunements thing is gonna be a recurring theme on Arcane, because Arcane, it's the trait line that you usually take when you know you're gonna be swapping attunements constantly and you wanna have benefits from it. As we saw here, you're gonna gain might, and here you're gonna heal yourself. So every time you swap attunements, you're gonna have some sort of effect that will benefit you from doing so. Next we have Elemental Attunement. As I was saying, again, another trait related to swapping attunements. This trait is super defining for the Arcane trait line, because basically when you're gonna go into fire, you're gonna go for the DPS, right? You're gonna try to hit people, you're gonna try to do damage. Might is obviously helpful for doing so. When you go into water, you wanna be a bit defensive, you wanna heal yourself, cleanse conditions. Obviously Regen is the way to go. Air and Swiftness is gonna be super useful, because with 9 seconds of Swiftness you're gonna have almost perma Swiftness if you're constantly swapping to air, right? And Protection, 5.5 seconds, it's a lot of protection when you attune to air, so it's a super useful trait, one of the staple traits for the Elementalist, because not only do you get these boons, but also you will give them to nearby allies, which is really useful because you can swap to earth to gain protection when you know a burst is gonna be coming. You can heal allies with the regen, etc. So really cool trait. Now let's head into this trait group. Arcane Resurrection, cast a Geyser when you begin reviving a downed ally. Geyser now partially revives downed allies. When you revive an ally, you and the revived ally gain an aura based on your attunement. So this is a support trait, gonna help you revive your allies more quickly. And you're gonna put a Geyser, which is the ability number 3 on Staff Water Attunement, that will heal people and will also help reviving the allies that are near the Geyser. So it's really useful as a support trait to help your teammates get up. And also you're gonna get an aura, which might be helpful. For example, if you know that they're gonna be trying to burst you down or kill your ally right before you revive them, You can swap to earth and gain a magnetic aura for you and your ally, so you will reflect those projectiles, or gain a frost aura for less damage, or a shocking aura for interrupting. Those three auras will be perfectly good defensive options. You're gonna be able to give those auras to help him stay a bit longer on the fight. Then we have Elemental Contingency, gain a boon when struck based on your current attunement. Retaliation on fire, this is the only retail source for Elementalists. An offensive boon is going to help you because if you're on fire, you're trying to do damage, and retaliation is going to help you achieve a bit more damage on your enemies. Fury on air, again, air attunement is also an offensive attunement, so that fury is going to be super helpful for dealing more damage. Protection on earth, obviously earth is a really protection driven attunement as we saw on the previous trait. And vigor on water, which is going to help you dodge more, and usually when you are in water you're trying to evade and cleanse yourself, keep yourself alive, so the vigor is really useful. Great trait, 10-second cooldown. Now let's look at Lesser Arcane Shield, which comes from Final Shielding. Cast Lesser Arcane Shield when your health drops below the threshold, and then you have Arcane Shield, which is a stun break and a 5-second block for 3 hits. If you go below 50%, this is going to automatically help you be very PvP driven, because if you get CC'd and they get you below 50%, you're going to break that stun and you're going to also get a defensive Arcane Shield. So really good PvP trait. Then we get to Elemental Enchantment. Gain concentration on your attunements, gain reduced recharge. So concentration is wound duration, which as you can see is tied to all the wound related stuff that this trait line offers. You have a wound here, you can gain a wound here as well, wounds here, basically it's all about the wounds and it's all about the attunement swapping. So this gives you more wound duration and recharges the attunement swapping. And then we have the last trait group, which is Evasive Arcana. This is one of the staple Elementalist moves. It's always been since it was introduced into the game, especially in PvP. Evasive Arcana gives you different effects on your dodge. If you are dodge on fire, you're going to do a flame burst for a very good amount of damage. If you dodge on water, you're going to get a cleansing wave on a 10-second cooldown, which is really useful. Now, it's exactly the same as the Dagger 5 offhand ability cleansing wave. Blinding Flash, arguably the less useful of all the effects. It might help when you're trying to stomp an enemy, or if in PvP, like if your ally is trying to stomp an enemy and you know the enemy is going to use some sort of ability to CC your ally, you can dodge into the enemy, blind them, hopefully they'll miss, and your ally will be able to stun, right? Then on Earth you have Shockwave, which is a little bit of bleeding and cripple, but I think the most used ones are, and it's also a blast finisher, the Shockwave, which is useful on fire fields. We're gonna look into that when we get into the fire trade line. But I think the most used ones are Flame Burst for offensive and Cleansing Wave to keep yourself alive. So there you have it, Evasive Arcana. Then we have Elemental Surge. Arcane skills gain reduced recharge, grant increased ferocity, and inflict a condition based on your attunement. Arcane stuff is gonna recharge quicker. It's gonna give you an Arcane Lightning, which is gonna increase your ferocity, so your critical hits will hit even more. And you also gain effects for the arcane abilities. I think this trait is really well suited for PvP for a series of reasons. There's a build called Fresh Air, which uses arcane abilities and the arcane trait line, and you can use the arcane stuff to CC enemies from afar with while attuned to air, or to burn them, or chill them, or blind them. Basically, you can make strategic decisions on which attunement to use the arcane abilities to not also do a really good amount of damage, but also CC your enemies. So it's a really cool PvP trait, I think. I personally use it on my Fresh Air build. We're gonna look into that in another video, but there we go, Elemental Surge. And finally, Bountiful Power, deal increased damage for each boon of you. I don't think it's the most used trait, to be honest, because flat damage modifiers like Bountiful Power can be useful for like offensive, pure DPS, glass builds for PvE or raids. Usually those builds use fire and air and one of the elite specializations, so you don't really take the arcane trade line. But in any case, if you find yourself in a situation where you're going to be wanting to do a lot of DPS and you have a lot of access to wounds, this can really help you get more DPS, because basically if you have I don't know, 5 wounds, you're gonna get 10%. If you have even more wounds, you're gonna have even more damage, right? Again, not the most useful or most used trait in this trait group. Probably Evasive Arcana is the one that most people take for PvP or PvP builds that use the Arcane trait line, but nonetheless a great option as well. So now I'm gonna choose these traits only for it to stop flashing. Now we're gonna go take a look at the offensive trait lines, which are fire and air. Okay, so let's start with fire. Fire is all about the burning, it's all about the power, it's all about the damage modifiers as well. We have Empowering Flame, gain power while in Fire Attunement. Pretty obvious, pretty straightforward. Basically, it's gonna help you do more damage while you're turned to fire. Then we have Burning Precision. Burning you inflict has an increased duration and your critical hits gain a chance to inflict burning. So this trait has a 20% increased duration for fire, which is gonna be the central trait on the fire trait line for Condi based PvE builds where you wanna burn your enemies as much as you can. This is gonna give you 20% increase, which is super huge, and it's also gonna have your critical hits to inflict burning as well. So this is a very burning driven, Condi damage driven trait, right? Then we have Conjurer, gain a fire aura when your ally picks up a conjured weapon. Conjured weapon abilities have reduced recharge. This might be helpful if you're running some sort of build that relies a lot of on certain abilities on the conjured weapons. The fire aura when your ally picks them up is neglectable. I mean, it's not a really big deal. If you are trying some sort of build that has those conjured weapons, this might be a good trait. Again, it's not one of the most popular traits on offensive on this offensive trait line, but it's nonetheless interesting. Then we have one of the few defensive traits on the fire trait line, which is Burning Fire. Cast Cleansing Fire when you have a number of conditions on you, a really PvP driven trait. I mean, on the open world, you're never gonna have probably more than 1 or 2 conditions when you're fighting mobs. In raids, I don't think there's many condition heavy encounters, although I might be wrong, but in any case then you would have some sort of support player giving you Condi cleanses and healing, so you wouldn't really take this trait on a PvE context. I think it's more or less a PvP trait, a really good one though, because Condis are really rampant on PvP at the moment. They always had a strong presence on PvP, and now more than ever this trait might be the one to help you stay alive a bit longer, right? Then we have Sunspot, gain a fire aura and damage nearby foes when you attune to fire. So as you can see, the second passive trait on all the lines will have some sort of effect when you attune to that element. In this case, you're gonna get a fire shield and you're gonna do a good amount of damage. A really cool trait. I mean, the fire shield might be helpful. If you're fighting enemies, you will gain might, you will burn him a little bit, and you will also do a bit of damage. So a cool passive trait. Then we have Pyromancer's Training, deal increased damage while attuned to fire, your fire weapon skills gain reduced recharge. So this is probably the most taken trait for any build relating the fire trait line. It's going to give you a 10% increase on fire, so this is a huge damage modifier, and it's going to recharge on 20% your abilities. So basically makes your fire attunement way better for any sort of build, because you're going to have a reduced recharge and you're going to do more damage, and what you want to do in fire is always damage, so this trait is going to help you achieve that. Probably the most popular trait on this trait group. Then we have one with fire. Fire shields you grant have increased duration and also grant might. Granting any other auras grants reduced might. One with fire, again, probably would be helpful in some sort of hybrid build where you're constantly pumping auras, and you also want to give offensive or defensive wounds. In this case, it would be an offensive option for aura sharing, but this trait is not really seen a lot because usually the aura sharing builds are support builds, and support builds don't use the fire trait line because it's not like a defensive support trait line, it's more of an offensive one. But in any case, one with fire. Then we're gonna go to Power Overwhelming, which I think is a nod to the StarCraft games from Blizzard. I think a Protoss unit used to say Power Overwhelming. Gain condition damage based on your power, which is 10%. You would think this trait would make it to the condition damage builds, but most builds will still use Pyromancer's Training because in Dagger you have Drake's Breath, and if you take this, you have it on a 4-second cooldown, and this pumps a lot of burning. So I think this trait is better suited for Condi builds. Sadly, Power Overwhelming has actually been kind of underwhelming as a trait and hasn't seen much use. Maybe a buff would make it a reasonable option to choose between Pyromancer's Training, but not a very popular trait on the fire line. Let's move to Burning Rage. Deal more damage to burning foes. Again, a 10% damage increase. In raids, obviously the boss is going to be burning all the time, so it's a flat damage increase. In PvP, if you're running the fire trait line, it means you're going to be using attacks that will burn your enemy, so this basically is asking you to keep the enemy burning to get more damage. And then we have the last trait group. Persisting Flames, comboing a blast finisher with a fire field grants Fury. Fire fields created by weapon skills last longer, cast Lava Fong when you're down. So this is the most used trait for PvE in the fire trait line. Having the blast finishers on fire granting Fury is huge because it grants a lot of Fury. It has a lot of access to fire fields and a lot of access to blast finishers. So this is a really good trait if you are playing an offensive PvE build, because it's going to help you maintain permanent Fury, and also the extra duration on the fire fields is going to increase your DPS, because fire fields are all about the damage. Think about, for example, Lava Font on the staff, and cast Lava Font when you're down might help you to rally a lot of times, because I don't know, if you're on an open world and you get down by the mobs, then you cast a lava field and that lava field will damage the mobs and probably kill them, helping you rally again. Really good trait, probably the most used trait on PvE when you take the fire trait line. Then we're gonna look at Pyromancer's Puissance. Gain might for using any skill while attuned to fire. So this is a trait that I would take with any sort of playstyle that will have me camping fire for DPS. I'm thinking probably offensive staff builds on Warby World might use this fairly successfully. Maybe some PvE builds, some open world builds, staff camping on fire. It has its uses, but I think all across the board a better DPS increase is Persisting Flames, but in any case, Pyromancer's Puissance. And finally, Blinding Ashes, inflict blindness on foes you burn. Sort of like a PvP trait, but again, I don't think the blindness on an 8-second cooldown is really worth it. I think if you're gonna have the fire trait line on PvP, you're focusing on doing damage, and for doing damage, either Pyromancer's Puissance or Persisting Flames are too much of a strong options to not take them. So Blinding Ashes hasn't really seen much use for the fire trait line. That's the fire trait line, and we're gonna look at air. Air is all about the critical hits, all about movement, and also a bit of CC. So let's check the traits. Zephyr's Speed, move faster while attuned to air. So this is like having a signet that will increase 25%, but every time you are on air. Both in PvE, like for example when you're on the open world or you're leveling, this might be really helpful because it's all about getting to places quickly. On PvP, it's gonna help you run away from enemies faster, although if you have swiftness, you don't really need the Zephyr's Speed. Then we have Zephyr's Boon, grant boons to allies you grant auras to. Again, like we saw on the fire trait line with the one with fire, if you're running some sort of a offensive aura sharing build that would probably use Tempest as an elite spec, you would take Zephyr's Boon. Fury and Swiftness are really good traits, especially on Warby World. You're basically having people move faster and hit harder, so always a good option. One with air, gains super speed when attuning to air. This trait has seen a lot of use on a very popular PvP build, which is Fresh Air, that basically keeps you coming back to air attunement for damage. And the super speed is really useful to be a lot harder to target, or to have melee attackers have a harder time trying to get to you. So there we have it, one with air, no cooldown, so again it's really useful. It's probably the most taken trait when you run the Fresh Air build on PvP. Then we have Ferocious Winds, gain ferocity based on your precision. This is going to be your main PvE option because it's going to give you ferocity based on a percentage of precision. Then we have Electric Discharge, strike your target with a ball of lightning when attuning to air with a radius of 900. This trait will create an electric discharge every time you swap to air, you're in combat and you're targeting somebody. You're going to hit them with the electric discharge, and it's one of the biggest damage sources for the PvE build Fresh Air. So there we have it, electric discharge. Also applies vulnerability, which is also helpful for dealing damage and burst damage to the enemies. Then we have Inscription, gain a boon casting a glyph based on your attunement, glyphs gain reduced recharge. This goes really well with an offensive PvE build that uses both fire and air. Or you want to have, I don't know, maybe a staff build that has a lot of ground-based AoE attacks, and you can use this to lower the cooldown on Glyph of Storms. You can use it to lower the cooldown on Glyph of Elemental Power as well, even the elite elementals. So Inscription, really good trait for anything relating glyphs. Then we have Aeromancer's Training, gain precision while attuned to air weapon skills gain reduced recharge. So this trait is like Pyromancer's Training. This is called Aeromancer's Training. You're gonna do all your air attacks hit harder because you're gonna have increased precision. The cooldown is gonna be reduced. Then we have Tempest Defense, cast Shocking Aura when disabled, deal increased damage to stun or knock down foes. So that's a whooping 20% increased damage on stun or knockdown foes. And you're gonna get a Shocking Aura every time you're disabled, which is useful in PvE because they're gonna try to hit you hard when they CC you, but then they are gonna get CC'd back with the Shocking Aura. And this trait also sees a lot of use in some raid encounters because it's gonna increase the damage for 20% on any boss that is stunned after you deplete the boss's break bar. So Raging Storm was introduced in the game fairly recently because of the change that we saw at the beginning with Arcane Prowess. So they introduced this trait to basically give you another access to Fury that is reliant on critical hits. So every time you strike a foe with a critical hit, it will give you 2.25 seconds of Fury with a 3-second cooldown. If you use gear that helps you gain more boon duration, you can get that Fury up to 3 seconds, and if so, if you have enough precisions, you might get permanent Fury by just attacking the enemy. So this trait also has a lot of synergy with one of the traits that we're gonna see next, and you're gonna see why in a second. Now for the last trait group we have Wall to the Heart, deal increased damage to enemies below the health threshold. This trait is really popular in PvE, it's gonna do a lot more damage, 20% increase for the second half of health of any enemy. So then we have Fresh Air, which is a trait that gives name to a PvP build for the Elementalist. Recharge air attunement on a critical hit, gain a ferocity boost when attuning to air. So every time you are on another attunement, let's say earth or water, and you crit the enemy, you can go back to air attunement. And the way Fresh Air works is that because you go back to air attunement so frequently, you're going to be doing a lot of damage to electric discharge. You're going to be moving faster with air, and you're also going to be critting more often because of Raging Storm. So this trait is central to not only a PvP build, but also few PvE builds as well for the Tempest Elite spec, where you are constantly going back to air to have the air overload that does a lot of damage. And finally we have Lightning Rod, cast Lightning Rod when you disable a foe, which will do a fairly good amount of damage and also put weakness on it. This is a very PvP trait. I've seen Phantheram, which is a great PvPer that plays Elementalist, use this trait on a Weaver build that relies on doing damage through the interrupts that Weaver has. So this is very much a PvP trait, and again it's very niche. Probably Fresh Air is the most used trait for a whole playstyle PvP wise. So now we're going to look at the defensive traits, which are Water and Earth. Soothing Mist, you and nearby allies recover health while you are attuned to water. So water is all about supporting, it's all about healing back both you and your allies. This trait is going to help you do that. The cool thing with Soothing Mist is that it's not a boon, it's an effect, so the enemy cannot remove it or corrupt it as they could do with Regen, right? Then we have Soothing Ice, gain Regen and Frost Aura when critically hit. A really good trait for anything related PvP, because you're going to be constantly getting hit by players, and this is going to help you sustain a bit. Then we have Piercing Shards, vulnerability you inflict has an increased duration, while attuned to water deal increased damage to vulnerable foes. So this is a really interesting trait because water has a fairly good amount of vulnerability on some weapon skills, but it's not really a damage dealing trait line, right? It's more of a defensive trait line. But in any case, Piercing Shards is a really interesting attack because you could start, I don't know, let's say a meteor shower on fire, right? And then swap to water to gain this benefit, and you will hit a lot harder any enemy that has vulnerability. But I mean, I think it's a little fiddly, like you have to go into a defensive attunement to do more damage, and then if you really need to go back into water to help to heal yourself, you already went when you didn't need it probably. I think this trait has a strong identity crisis, but I don't know, it might seem some niche uses on some places. Then we have stop, drop, and roll. Dodging removes burning and shield from enemy allies. It's not really used in water because we're gonna see that there are way better options for removing any condition, not only burning or shield, on nearby allies on the next trait. So this trait hasn't really seen much use neither on PvP or PvE. To be honest, I wouldn't recommend it. I think it's kind of underwhelming. Then healing ripple. Heal nearby allies when attuning to water. So this is a trait where you do a burst of healing to all nearby allies on a 240 radius when attuned to water. Again, water is all about the support, all about keeping your allies and yourself alive, so this trait is super useful because, as you can see, Guild Wars is not really a game where the healer has to target the ally and slowly heal him. It's more about where you heal anything that is right in front of you. So Healing Ripple is really cool because you can use it on the move, you can get close to an ally to heal him, you don't have to target it, you can heal up to 5 allies. It's really useful for that support role on Elementalist, right? Then we're gonna go to Soothing Disruption. Cantrips gain reduce recharge and grant boons. So as you saw on the first video, cantrips are fairly defensive abilities, so this trait is gonna reduce the recharge on cantrips and also give you regen and vigor, which are boons that will help you stay alive. Vigor is gonna help you dodge more, regen is gonna give you healing over time. Then we have Cleansing Wave, remove conditions from nearby allies when attuning to water. So in anything that involves supporting your allies through cleansing conditions, being PvP or PvE, Cleansing Wave is the way to go. Then we have Aquamancer's Training. Deal increased damage when your health is above the threshold. Water weapon skills gain reduced recharge. Again, another damage increase on water, but I think this has a lot more synergy with the water trait because it's about dealing damage while your health is above the threshold, and water is all about keeping your health high. So the two functionalities of this trait complement each other, because every time you top yourself with healing, you're gonna have a damage increase as well. And this trait also reduces water weapon skills, which is super useful because basically you're gonna be able to support yourself and your allies more constantly. I personally use it on the Fresh Air build because it's going to help me do more damage and it's going to help me stay alive longer. Then we have Aquatic Benevolence, increase healing to other allies. Effectiveness increased 15%, really basic trait, going to help you heal more, and you really want to help your allies with any healing that you can pump out. Then we have Cleansing Water, cleanse conditions from allies you grant regeneration to. So as I told you before, stop, drop, and roll is not really a very used trait because Cleansing Water is the king of condi removal both for you and for your allies. Every time you gain regen, you're gonna cleanse a condition, and you have regen when you use cantrips, you have regen when you attune to water thanks to elemental attunement, you have regen if you get critically hit by Soothing Ice. A lot of water-based weapon skills give you regen as well. So I mean, regen is really easy to access on water, and here you're going to remove a condition every time you get access to regen. And this is also a core trait for, let's say, Tempest support build, where you can give regen through auras, and using this trait is going to help you also give condition cleansing to your allies through the auras as well. Then we have Powerful Aura. Any aura you grant yourself is granted to nearby allies. So this is a really cool trait, very much tied to the Tempest Elite spec, because that spec it's all about giving auras through utility skills, through overloads, and with this trait you can give 2 additional auras using the auras from the weapon skills. As a Tempest you can heal your allies through auras, so this will effectively help you heal your allies a lot more. And finally we have Soothing Power. Soothing Mist is more effective with 100% effectiveness increased, so this is going to make Soothing Mist heal a lot more. So I think both these traits are much more suited for maybe a World World party composition where you're not the main condi cleanser and your role is basically raw output healing for the party. And there we have it, that's the water trait line, all about supporting and healing your allies and yourself. And finally we have the earth trait line, which is more about your survivability and your defense rather than healing allies. We have Stone Flesh, gain toughness while attuned to earth, 150 toughness. Toughness will passively reduce the incoming power damage that you get. Earth Embrace, cast Armor of Earth when your health drops below the threshold, and you gain Armor of Earth, which is protection and stability, and also a stun break. This trait is fairly reminiscent of Final Shielding, although I think Armor of Earth is arguably a better shield than Final Shielding because it's gonna give you stability, you're not gonna be CC'd, it's gonna give you protection. There we have it, Earth's Embrace. Then we have Serrated Stones, bleeding you inflict has an increased duration, deal increased damage to bleeding foes. So this is the trait that will help you do a lot more condition damage through bleeding. Right now, the condition damage builds for PvE and Elementalists are much more reliant on fire and burning, so bleeding it's a weaker option at the end of the day. Because of that, this trait hasn't seen much use, to be honest. But if you're running any sort of build that relies on burning and bleeding, this is the way to go. Then we have Elemental Shielding, auras you grant to allies also grant protection. So there is a build on PvP and also on World v World that is a Tempest support build that relies heavily on water and earth as well. If you take this trait, every time you pulse an aura to your allies, you're going to cleanse conditions, give them regen, give them vigor, and give them protection. So this really makes aura sharing Tempest a strong option for supporting your allies. Although that playstyle has seen a bit of a decline since all the boon hate that was introduced in the game through Scourges and Spellbreakers. Elemental Shielding, a really good supporting option for your allies as well. Then we have Earth and Blast, damage and cripple nearby foes when attuning to Earth. This trait is going to help you keep fleeing enemies close to you, close to your allies, because in Guild Wars, when you're supporting, you're not only just cleansing people or healing them, you're also trying to CC or give opportunities to your team to capitalize on any weaknesses that you can inflict on your enemy, and Earth and Blast is a fairly good example of that playstyle. Then we have a Strange of a Stone, gain condition damage based on your toughness. Again, this is not a really DPS PvE trait because you wouldn't take toughness on that sort of build. Maybe on some Elementalist condition damage World v World build where you have a lot of defenses through toughness, although there are classes that are way better suited for condition damage than Elementalists, at least on player versus player settings, because Ele doesn't have a lot of access to many different condis. So this trait is not that used on any game mode as far as I've been able to see. Then we have Rock Solid, grant stability to nearby allies when attuning to earth. I think conceptually this is a really cool trait. For example, in PvP, if you're seeing your ally trying to stomp somebody and they don't have stability, they're susceptible to be struck by any CC attack that comes from a downed player, and you can quickly swap to earth and give stability to stomp, and you can also use it on yourself if you're trying to stomp anyone. As much as I think this is a really cool trait, I think the stability stacks are too few. I would like to see at least a couple of stability stacks. I think that would make it more interesting. Maybe a flat 3 seconds as well would be a good amount of time. But this trait is not really picked in PvP as well, because the next trait is way more powerful. And then we have Geomancer's Training, which decreases the duration of movement impairing conditions applied to you, that being shield, cripple, and immobilize. Earth weapon skills gain reduced recharge. So this trait goes really well with the skills that you have on the Focus Earth Attunement, both Obsidian Flesh and Magnetic Wave, because it's gonna decrease Obsidian Flesh up to 40 seconds from 50 seconds, and also Magnetic Wave down to 20 seconds. And these abilities are two of the most powerful defensive options for the Elementalist, right? And it's also gonna decrease the duration of movement impairing conditions, which are always a bad thing when you are against any other player. So Geomancer's Training, really cool trait, and especially when combined with these two abilities from the Focus weapon. Then we have Geomancer's Defense. You receive less damage from nearby foes, 10% on a ranged threshold of 360. Earth, as you can see, it's all about giving you defensive options, especially for melee characters which hit a lot harder than ranged characters. This trait is really useful because it's a 10% decrease damage. And finally we have this trait group, Diamond Skin, remove conditions when you're stuck while your health is above the threshold. Really powerful trait because with all the conditions that the game has at the moment, if every time you get stuck while you are above 75%, you're gonna remove a condition. And usually you would take the earth trade line along with the water trade line to play a support role. So water is gonna help you not only remove a lot of conditions, but also maintain you above the health threshold of 75%. So diamond skin is really cool. If you happen to be on a 1v1 with very condi heavy builds, they're gonna have a really bad time because they're not gonna be able to put any condition on you as long as you are above the health threshold. Then we have written in stone, signets gain reduced recharge and continue to grant their passive bonuses while recharging. So if you take this trait, you can use your signets actively as much as you want, and you will also retain the passive effect. So let's say, for example, if I take this trait, not only I'm going to be healing myself through the healing per cast on the Signal of Restoration, but I can also use it actively and heal myself and still get the health every time I cast a spell. So this trait makes the signets way more useful. As much as I think it's a really cool trait, Diamond Skin and Stoneheart, as we're gonna see, bring a lot more defensive options to the table, and so written in stone it's not really that use. Also because Earth is a really PvP driven attunement, if you're taking this trait line you wouldn't really take much signets at all, maybe only the Signet of Restoration, but not the other signets. Maybe the Signet of Earth, there's a lot better defensive options as well. So written in stone is not really that used at the moment. And finally we have a Stoneheart. You cannot be critically hit while attuned to Earth. So Stoneheart is your most powerful defensive options against power-based attacks. As long as you remain on Earth, the enemy will not crit you. So you can preemptively swap to Earth when you know that somebody's gonna try to burst you, and you can deny that burst because it's not gonna crit. As much powerful as a Stoneheart sounds, I don't think it's better than, let's say, Diamond Skin. Why? Because Elementalist is all about swapping attunements all the time. You wouldn't really be doing your job properly if you stood on the Earth attunement for a long time. So Stoneheart hasn't seen that much use in PvP as, let's say, Diamond Skin. Now there's something to be said about all the Earth trait line, and that is probably the least used trait line for Elementalist for a fairly good reason. Elementalist, as you know, is a class that has very little base toughness and very little base vitality. The squishiest class in the game, right? And because it doesn't have as much passive based toughness, you don't really build toughness to keep your Elementalist alive. You actually have a much better way of surviving through healing yourself back from the damage that you receive. And as you can see, in PvP, you're always going to be Elementalists that can go from 50% to almost 100% health back through healing with the water attunement and other abilities, right? So Elementalist actually gets more sustain and more defense using healing power and air than it actually does by using toughness. That doesn't mean that air doesn't have its uses though. For example, if you play a support Tempest, Earth is amazing trade line to keep yourself alive, so it has a lot of value in that regard. So there we have it, guys. We saw all the traits for the core specializations for the Elementalist. So hopefully I gave you a fairly good overview of each trait, and also a general idea of the most useful traits and trait lines on each game mode. So there we have it. This is the second video for the Elementalist. On the next one we're gonna take a look at the elite specs and a general overview of playstyles and builds for all game modes. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to share it with anyone interested in the Elementalist, and don't forget to leave a like, and if you want, subscribe to the channel. That is it for now. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.